welcome to the ongoing RTS webinar series. Just so you know, you will get a link to this webinar. So if those of you who are busy checking emails while you're trying to listen to us and you are missing something, you'll be able to follow up. And of course, we post these all on our website and all our previous webinars as well. I also want to welcome some of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association members. We recently announced a partnership with them where they've asked us to make these broadcasts available to all their members, as well as some content for the conferences. So we are excited about that new relationship. And today our topic is the social revolution, changing the marketplace, workplace, and the world. And a dear friend of mine, Amanda Height, has agreed to join us and share her insights. I met Amanda years ago when she was actually a recruiter, and became an early advocate of the web. I've attended some of her little mini conferences to teach people how to use the web. She has since really, joined a large movement here and started a company called Be the Change Revolutions. And so I'm going to start off by just, once I introduce myself, it's Fred LeFranc. I'm the founder and chaos strategist of Results for Strategy. The thing that's amazing here is that knowledge historically has doubled every 100 years. Knowledge is now doubling every 12 years. And as soon as the Internet of Things rolls out, knowledge will be doubling every 12 hours, which is insanity. And that's why we can't keep up with anything. So amidst all this clutter of information and data we get hit with us, as marketeers, we're trying to get through to our public and engage with them, and Amanda's to share her great insights here. But let's start off with Amanda's story. Amanda, why don't you tell us how you got started in this crazy path?
Yeah, sure. So I think having 32 homes by the age of 18 led me to kind of not just accept and embrace change, but actually look for it and get excited about possibilities of an ever-evolving, especially in technology world. And so I was a real early adopter of the internet, of social media and social networks. And I often like to say, like, my life. So as we talk about changing the marketplace, work in the world, it kind of starts with changing us in our individual lives. And my life is a complete case study in social media return on investment. I met my fiance through Twitter. We have a pretty endearing story about how we met through that social network. We now are the proud parents of 2 adopted rescue kittens, Prince, who you see there in the pictures. We actually discovered him through Facebook. So a friend of ours had passed along an adorable video that was being spread on social media, and we discovered him and had to adopt him. Prince and Toby now have their own Instagram, where they're able to be influencers in their own space and advocate for things like adoption and just be adorable. But on the personal side, a lot of things like that have happened through social media. Then on the business side, obviously I started a company that leverages social media. My first company that I started, so I am a HR marketeer, kind of turned marketeer, but I was able to start a company with a $0 marketing budget, being able to leverage social media. Probably over 60 to 70% of our hires have come through relationships we've built through social media and discovered through social media. Our company, we call ourselves, while we're a social media agency, we call ourselves a human-powered media agency, because it's our deep belief and all of our experiences we've discovered is that people are the medium with social media. And it's really not about the platforms. It's about the people that are using the platforms, and they're the true power. And so all of our strategies and approaches are really people-centered. And how do you activate people online to be advocates for your brand, to spread positive word of mouth, to drive action? With that, our kind of mission is to be the change we wish to see in marketing work in the world, bring the humane back to the internet. And we've raised about $2 million through social media, through causes that we care about. And it really starts, while we follow a lot of brands on social media, it really starts, we look for signals of how this works by other things in the bigger ways that social media is impacting the world, and then apply that to our business models.
Well, Amanda, you bring up a good point. I think for the people on this webinar, get your pencil and papers out, or your notebooks, your electronic notebooks, because Amanda's going to explain a lot of different terms you may never have heard before. It's her currency and her language. But I know when I've spent time with Amanda, and especially in preparation for this webinar, there's some things I hadn't considered before, because how you communicate and approach with people has really changed. So, Amanda, if you could just start walking us through that so people can begin to understand how you view the world. It's a very unique perspective.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so actually on the last slide, it was just a couple things on that. This is like kind of the evolution and revolution of social media through Time Magazine. And what's really interesting about that is that everything has changed and advanced, yet nothing's different. And so if you think about, from 2009, where, Barack Obama on that was recognized if you think about it in social media context, really for mobilizing people on the internet. And there was people for the first time really having like political conversations that kind of hit the tipping point. They were mobilizing, organizing, talking online. Back in 2010, that's when Zuckerberg became a hero, right? Because he was connecting the world. And he was like me, a young, naive entrepreneur who saw only kind of the benefits in social media and all of its power to be good. And we've seen how that's advanced over the years, where we've also seen the dark side of social media. So we've seen these really powerful superpowers for good also get into hands of people that use them for bad. The protester of the year. What was really interesting about that, it underscores this people are the medium point, and that during that time, we had, in that Time article, if you read that piece, they talk about how the platforms are important, but it wasn't about the platforms. It was about the people behind the platforms, their courage, their bravery, their passion, their ability to organize. They were just using the platforms as tools. And we see that even now, as you kind of fast forward to 2013, when you see these movements that have spread that have really changed the world or changed perspectives, like the Me Too movement, right? That we're powered by social media, but really it's the medium was the people behind them and their passion and their bravery to tell stories. Also during that time, though, again, we've had social media used for bad. And on the marketing side, it's things like ad fraud or manipulation. We've seen that with terrorist groups and foreign governments spreading disinformation. Or I think of the Internal Research Agency that this kind of Russia, how they've used social media to. A lot of people talk about the ads, but the most powerful thing they did is they literally had buildings of what they called high-paid troll farms that pretended to be you gotta have profiles pretending to be American citizens online, and community groups online where they were, paying about $2 million a month in salaries to because they get that people are the medium, and so pretending to kind of drive and make conversations appear to going in one direction or a city. So I think if you look at all of that, and as we've done over the years, is just studied those techniques, the science behind that, and say, how does this apply to brands? How does this apply to organizations? And that's what we'll get into next.
That's great. Well, I think the comment you made in terms of how it's been weaponized is relevant today. We all know that. But let's talk about the positive side of social media. And you've done a lot of great things to recognize that people are the medium. And then in fact, this is really a conversation just on that platform. You and I right now are having a conversation. I'm in the West Coast, you're on the East Coast. You got a bunch of people listening in from all over the country. So that dialogue is there. And it's in how you use it now becomes an important thing to really connect with people. So walk us through some examples of that here.
Yeah, great. And so, a lot of the examples we're going to show today are going to be talking about activating human mediums, human connections, and through emotions and experiences, and how do you activate that? So we can go to the next section there. And what I'm going to do real quick is just kind of make the case for this, and then we're going to go into stories. There's never been, as Fred mentioned earlier, there's never been more noise online. There's more content, that we're exposed to more content than ever before. There's a slide on the picture here on your left is every 60 seconds on the internet, the amount of content that's produced. Meanwhile, we have things like we're approaching 50% of users. I've seen reports of anywhere from 32 to 47% of users that are using ad blockers. So we're investing a lot in ads online, but people are using ad blockers to block out because they're just saying it's too much noise. Brands have increased, 78% of brands have increased their investment in content and the amount of content they put out, but engagement has decreased. And so part of the case for this human power media is it's not about like producing more content or even better quality content, because you're really taking a squirt gun to a water fight with a tsunami of content. What's more important is the context of the relationship or the medium in which people are getting content. And so that's what we'll go into the next part, where think about this for a second. 98% of what people hear about your brand or organization, so the content that they see, whether it's people talking about you online, whether it's user-generated content, posting pictures at your restaurants, let's say, 90% of that is coming from the audience. And so just let that sink in. Most of the content on the web that people will see about your brand is coming from somebody else. It's not you, it's the audience. And so, but meanwhile, 96% of those mentions and those things go unresponded by most brands. So all of this conversation that's happening, and there's very little focus on how do we influence. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, to influence that. So we focus on, so kind of the process here is we focus on activating human media through 4 main areas. And one of those is existing communities. So right now, people talk a lot about building their own community, but there are existing communities that already exist online. I think about an example of, we had a brand that we were doing research for, which would be some good target audiences on social. And their target was millennial moms. They wanted to reach more millennial moms. And so we found, and this is one example, a community called Scary Mommy. And they talk about the real world challenges of millennial moms, what real life is like. A lot of the content's really funny. There's a lot of conversation around this community. That community alone on their platforms have millions of already built community that comes and tunes in, that feels bonded as a community that trusts this platform. Activating a community like that on behalf of the brand in a very organic, authentic way is far more powerful. So identifying communities that already exist that you could plug into and become a part of. The next part is influencers. So a lot of times there's individuals that your target audience is listening to, that they trust their advice, that they listen to their recommendations and opinions. And they have large audiences that they have engaged, that they influence. And so engaging them, winning them over, making them fans of your brand. The brand itself, its ability to engage with people online. We have brands where 14 hours a day, we're doing nothing but listening into conversations and engaging with influencers and communities and advocates along the way, and kind of driving and cheering on that word of mouth, or driving whatever those call to actions are. And then the last thing is your advocates. So I often say that no one can grow a love for something like those that love it the most. You have internal advocates, some of these are your employees. You have external advocates, who are just huge fans of the brands that would probably do anything. How do we have strategies in each of these areas to activate people that are talking about positive things about word of mouth, and we're going to get into some examples of that.
Yeah, no, the fascinating thing is that for the first time ever, this ad spend on social media and online is now greater than broadcast media, which is an enormous change. I mean, you're talking about an industry that since the early 1900s has been the biggest revenue generator. It's now happening through social media. So Amanda's going to walk us through some examples of how this can occur.
Sure. So so we can go through some of this rather quickly. This just shows some of the benefits that you get through a human-powered strategy, kind of, or a more organic approach to this, and definitely kind of winning share of voice over your audience and increase content. And this is where, a little differently than ads, where you have to pay for that ad. You might get a lot of reach for that. You might hit the right target audience, but you have to keep paying for that. when you take an approach like we're describing, you get to build on this and that momentum builds, and then the examples, you'll see that. But this is just an example of a BTC client, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week that we're engaging with influencers, advocates, and communities and activating them. Their share of voice went to over 1 billion word of mouth impressions in a month. So we started around, we took over, they had about they'll use Twitter as an example. They had about 3,000 brand mentions on Twitter a month. That quickly escalated with that kind of focus on human-powered media to over 300,000 mentions a month. The next kind of colorful category you see there on the right, that's all of their competitors combined with that. And so, yeah, and so we can actually skip past the next two. They're just more kind of case ROI that just shows that there's you get way more for the investment in this approach. But let's get into some of the stories.
Okay, good.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, these are more process things. We do a lot of geeky stuff like audience analysis and influencer and network mapping to kind of identify what the right, because a big question is, what are the right communities? And who are the right influencers, or how do we find our advocates? We have a lot of geeky tools that we use to help identify those and analyze those and analyze those before we activate them, which we can
well, yeah, and I think, Amanda, as we go into this, for the people in the webinar, this is where you start seeing techniques you haven't thought about before, because I get people talking to me all the time, okay, that's great. So I know I want to use social media, but how do I do that? And Amanda's willing to share the process, and here are these 3 steps of analyze, identify, then activate. So you get to that part, because you got to do your homework. You don't just start posting things on the web arbitrarily. And what Amanda's going to share is how she actually does that. So here's the first part in terms of how do you analyze it.
Yeah, so a lot of times what we'll do is the first thing is really clearly articulating who the target audience is that we identify that we want to reach. We then go, and through some analytic tools that we use, we'll start analyzing the conversation that those audiences are having. That gives us some really rich data to see what kind of messaging works with this audience. What do they care about? What's their conversation around right now? And who's influencing those conversations? And so we do an audience analysis where we're mapping out kind of the networks. When you map out a network, there's a lot of different ways that we can view that, but you can start to see as we set this on, who are the bigger influencers as a part of this conversation, helps us identify them. And then we can say, okay, what content is spreading the most, is getting engaged the most, is getting the most clicked on? What kind of content resonates with it? It's not always what we like, in our brand worlds. A lot of times we're, the photo shoots with the hairspray and, the very pretty pictures that resonates with us. It's not always the same stuff that resonates with an audience. And so it allows us to identify the content, when the best times to post are, and engage. So we're equipped with that data before we go into activating. On the next one, on identifying, so we take that, again, these 3 separate categories. Okay, where are our passionate influencers or our passionate advocates? And then how can we design a program specifically for those advocates? It's ongoing, not a one-time thing. You'll see in our examples, some examples of advocate programs we put together to where everybody can be a part of, your brand ambassadors or your digital advocates, and maybe they get free, first access to new products to try, or they can give you feedback, kind of new focus group there. But how do we identify them and then start building? Maybe it's a Facebook group for those folks, or a messaging app that they're connected to, again, where you're providing them, kind of building relationships among them. Then we identify influencers, and so in our mapping we target influencers and usually segment them. Sometimes through social you can reach PR and media influencers or celebrities and various things, and we like to build out data on each of one of those. What are the audiences they influence? Who are the people that are influencing them? What are the causes they care about? What are the things that are really important? Because in order to engage these influencers, we got to really understand them and how they tick and what's going to be beneficial. Because the biggest mistake people make on influencer marketing is try to make it pay to play like everything else, right? I pay for the ad, it gets put out there. Then you're taking the same traditional approaches and trying to apply it to something like that, versus taking a really authentic approach and finding out, how can I really give value to this person? And so we fill out these profiles with all the information that we can find about this person and then strategize that way. And then again, as I mentioned before, identifying kind of niche communities. And then the next part is activate. And that's just where we're creating, okay, what are some like passionate ideas that we can have around missions that we can activate all of these people around, or and then how do we include them in the creation process of our content and our stories so they feel a part of this, and then in real time we're tracking those conversations, we're engaging, we're kind of the back end that's just fueling the word of mouth and the actions. And now we finally, you see I've been itching to get to the storytelling parts, and I think that's what's next.
Oh, and I think, Amanda, you're just going through what you just said for the people who are neophytes to this, the idea of analyze your audience or what your message is going to be, identifying who they are. And one of the things I learned too is it's not the person who has the most followers. You know, you can go after Kim Kardashian, but she may not be a relevant person to the people who are going to influence your community. And I think that was an important message that you had in here besides activation. So I know, and I appreciate you sharing some case studies here. And of course, this is the famous sort of adjusted Gandhi quote: "Be the change you wish to see in the marketing world, work in the world." And I really appreciate that. So let's see what you did here.
Yeah, so this is an example of, so one of those is activating niche communities. This is back when we did some work with Applebee's. The target audience was millennials. How do we get millennials to engage and fall in love with Applebee's? And so as we started identifying potential types of millennials that we thought would be good fits to try to engage, and we started defining that, we also started noticing opportunities for millennials. And so one of these groups were gamers that were online, and this is a fun story of kind of social media gone bad but turned right. We had these huge groups of gamers who have a lot of disposable income, and they were online for a Friday night. Their fun thing to do was like to go troll brand pages. So they came on and they were actually trolling Applebee's, making fun of Applebee's, kind of saying, why don't you serve Battletoads? As we were kind of Googling that, we realized, hey, this is a kind of a vintage game that all these gamers liked. And as we were clicking on these pages, we knew they had massive audiences. So we saw this as a potential, instead of kind of like shutting down the page and ignoring that and hoping it goes away, we saw this as a potential to turn this audience around to be fans of the brand. And through that, we started becoming a part, we have this no social engagement left behind. We worked with Jill, who was the social media manager with Applebee's at the time, and then we were kind of the agency kind of community management stuff we took over, and we were on there and we were learning about their community and talking their language. So why don't you serve Battletoads? Well, they're off on a distant planet saving Princess Angelica from the evil Dark Queen. But we have a great lemon shrimp fettuccine, you could come try. And they really, we had fun. We had fun with them. We gave them love. Quickly, they turned around. Applebee's has a reply guy. Wait, what? And it turned very quickly and organically into this Applebee's, 7,000 pieces of fan art. If you go back one slide, Fred, another example. So we won over this huge community of millennials that became fans. Then we started targeting, we noticed that frequently on Twitter, these boy band fans were trending, and it wasn't necessarily the boy bands themselves tweets, but it was these big fandoms, so these accounts that had hundreds of thousands of followers that were trending the conversation. And so what we started doing is finding these accounts, being a part of their community. You see the tweet there that says, "I love how Applebee's is one of us." So we knew their inside language. We were able to engage with them. We started with the brand. They had about 16,000 followers. These communities actually started their own campaigns to get people to follow Applebee's. You see the Applebee's 200K trending. That's when they wanted to go past the 200,000 follower mark. We said, how do we turn that into sales? So we have all of this word of mouth, this positive energy. They started relating Applebee's as part of their identity of their fandom. And so we started doing kind of activations where we drove them to restaurants. We created meetups so their little fandoms could come to Applebee's across the country and go meet there. And so you can go to the next slide. And yeah, I don't know how many brands that their community managers online or their account online. The Applebee's Reply Squad. They get fan mail. We would go to, this is when Applebee's was based in Kansas City, we would go to the corporate office, and they would have like stacks of fan mail sent to the different Reply Squad members from this online community. So we'll go to the next.
Well, we're going to try this and see if it works. We got a video here, so let's see if it plays it and goes to the end. If not, we'll skip it and go on.
On Twitter, what do I think of? I think of exemplary service. I think of on-brand marketing all the time. I think of being there for your fans, engaging with them.
Reply on Twitter from Applebee's. ARB, ARL, ARS, ARE, ARC, ARN, ARV, ART, ARQ, ARJ.
If you don't like Applebee's, let us know why. You're wrong, but we'll listen.
We found out about the Shorty Awards. We started bombarding them with nominations. We can just read all 20,000 of those that we sent.
And they realized we are more than just a dollar sign. It feels like a family.
Well, I first found out about them because my son last year was doing math homework and they were in one of the word problems. And so she tweeted about it, and I saw it, and I was like, oh, hey, Applebee's, they're pretty cool. So I asked him for a follow, and they saw me back, and they would say, ask an athlete. And I just started talking to them more and getting to know them better, and it just turned into this really great friendship that we have.
I feel like Applebee's Reply Squad knows who I am. That only furthers my passion for eating at Applebee's. And that's how restaurants should be, if you ask me.
But the thing that makes me happy about Applebee's Reply Squad is that I'm an aspiring singer, and it's my dream to be a singer. And they really support me with that. Like ARB, always watching my videos, and that makes me so happy because he's just such a nice person, or she. I'm not sure if it's a boy or a girl.
I'm pretty sure that when my birthday passed, I got a little happy birthday shout out.
And all of them are amazing. They're just so great. They're some of the best people I've ever met in my life. I love them all so much.
They're great. I've had a great time. I love to interact with them. I love their wit. I love their humor and their kindness and their fun. And that's what Applebee's is. They're a great group.
And the fact that they will support me through my dreams makes me really happy. I just love Applebee's Reply Squad because they're the nicest people on the earth that you will ever talk to.
Yeah.
Love story, complete.
If you're not doing it like Applebee's, then you're not doing it at all. Love you.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I tell you, Amanda, the first time I saw this, it was incredible to me how much it appeared that these young kids connected to the brand. It's like you fill the void in their lives. You're like their best friends. So it really shows the power of really connecting in the human way. It's a great example of how to do that. And for those of you who are on the webinar, hopefully you were able to sort of see and hear all of that. And again, we will send out a copy of this to you. So if you haven't heard it all its entirety now, you will later on. But Amanda, you've got some other case studies here, and I know you'll make some comments on it.
Yeah, sure. And and with that, I want to underscore, when you have a brand that's been around that long, that maybe wouldn't be you wouldn't think about millennials being an audience that would be attracted to that brand maybe right away, right? And so the unique power that social media has to offer, because you have your touch points with your guests when you go in, where you can give them that experience and you can build that relationship there. It allows you to build that relationship at scale, make them as you saw, a lot of those people, Applebee's became a part of their identity, right? Like, this is a part of our fandom. Like, we go to Applebee's, that's what we do. And so we're able to build that spirit for the brand online. Without being in the restaurant. Obviously, with the outcome is to make Applebee's their favorite restaurant. That's the place they want to go when they go out. So the next thing we're going to do, so that was kind of community, showed some examples of how we got communities and a target audience of millennials and focused on different fandoms. Activating advocates. So we like to create advocate strategies and ongoing programs that only grow, build momentum and fuel. And there's some different, these are two examples of approaches we've taken. One is we took Instagram and for an entire year said, we're not putting any brand content on this. We're turning Instagram over to the fans for an entire year. And one of the reasons we did that is we were thinking, okay, how do you drive traffic? And we were noticing that on Instagram, if somebody's in your restaurant or somebody posts about your brand on Instagram, they're posting a picture of them in the restaurant. So if we can do a strategy that increases user-generated content on Instagram, that's more people in the restaurants. And so by doing this, we would give out like different kind of missions and fun challenges to either be able to be featured, and whether it's we had like a kind of a Be Famous activation for advocates that we did, where you could be featured in either a commercial or social media content or on our Instagram page. We had things like we kind of had a platform where we could give them free trials and try things first, but there's a lot of ways that we kind of rewarded them along the way. But those missions might be, hey, we have a new all-in burger. Take a burger selfie, and yours might be the next content that's posted on our Instagram page. So that generated 150,000 new Instagram followers and over 500,000 pieces of user-generated content for the Applebee's thing itself. Another strategy to approach we've done, because advocates are also internal, we've taken a brand and given social media completely over to the employees, and went from like the brand accounts at that time. This is a very small regional brand who had about 527 followers to in 90 days, by giving over to the employees, over 26,000. And gave them missions each week to go drive, because they were connected to people in the community and had them, the gift card sales were up over 200% year over year because of that. We won some great awards, ESPN's #1 sports bar awards, through advocacy that they drove. And so real results from putting driving the brand into the hands of advocates. You can go to the next one.
Yeah, and I do work with walk-ons, and they saw a big difference in their store count as well. And it's a brand that, besides winning Best Sports Bar in America, a third of the company was bought by Drew Brees, the quarterback for New Orleans Saints, a few years ago, which didn't hurt their publicity, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. And so now the next examples are going to be in activating influencers in some ways that play out. I'll say this, that the biggest challenge that people have in experimenting with influencer marketing is finding the right influencers. And I often say that marketers and politicians ruin everything, especially as it relates to like these powerful tools in marketing. They try to make everything kind of quick and easy and transactional. And so some of the examples, so a lot of people are trying to do this like pay to play thing with marketers. And making it very transactional. We'll pay you this to post something on your Instagram page, and it's just not as effective. And I'll talk about then a more organic approach that I'm going to describe, and I'll describe that through an example. You can go to the next one. So here is an example of I'm going to show you two examples of unpaid kind of organic relationships with influencers that's built over time, and then also one where if you are going to pay, because there's sometimes that makes sense, how to kind of take that approach. So this was Applebee's was doing an event in Times Square, and they had rolled out this new menu. It was Taste the Change, investing a lot of money in this event. And so the trick here is, how do we get, because they have restaurants across the country, how do we get restaurants, this investment here to spread across the country and get people to go and try this new menu? And so social was our prime vehicle here. And so one of the things we decided to do on the advocates end, and kind of in the general end, is if you go into Applebee's today and Taste the Change, you have a chance to be featured on a Times Square billboard, right? Your picture, so you have to take a picture of it, upload that picture, have a chance to be featured on that. We live stream at the time, it was kind of Periscope is what we did. So we got a top Periscope employee. We didn't pay any of these influencers. Obviously, this is a big experience we can offer them that is beneficial to them. But it was kind of, people across all of our kind of social media fans and people on the internet could tune in and be a part of that experience. That's what we call a social experience. And so they were able to see the interviews with the chefs or see the performances on stage. And we even let the online viewers go backstage and through the Periscope have some Q&A with Jason Derulo. And so then what we did was on the influencer end, we took 50 of some of the top influencers in the New York City area and invited them to a VIP event. We brought them to this VIP event. We surprised them by taking them backstage and letting them take selfies with Jason Derulo. We took those selfies and we put them on the billboard. They didn't know we were going to do any of this. It was a surprise. We took pictures, everything that we put on billboards. We had a photographer out there taking pictures and then posting them to on a web page that we had. And then our reply squad online was taking those links and sending them. Replying and sending these to the people in their social media accounts. And so they started spreading that, right? They're still talking about some of that today. So it's how we kind of organically did that. So there's kind of a picture there on the left of one of the fans at Applebee's, their picture on the billboard. And then to extend this campaign, we decided to do a little bit of a paid part on that. And so to extend it, to kind of take the momentum, because if you saw on that last one, we had over 400,000 on that day, 400,000 word of mouth impressions that were built up from that. Watch Applebee's was trending that day. What we did is we wanted to build on that momentum and bring it more focused on the stores again, extend that. And so we did pay 3 influencers, but we made them work for it. It wasn't, we're gonna give you X amount of money to just make a post about the brand. It was, they did a live stream all day, and they coordinated influencers and meetups in Applebee's across the country, where all of those influencers were to host those meetups and bring their fans into. So this is direct driving sales into those restaurants and talk about the new menu. And so I think it's totally great to like pay influencers, but we actually make them work for it, and there is a measurable result of the impact that it's having on the restaurant. For this particular thing, we saw a 30% traffic increase because of this activation. But you kind of see the difference there than some of these now. We're seeing the biggest mistake that people are making in influencer marketing is taking someone, Fred, as you said, that has a lot of followers. Some of those quote unquote influencers like paid for some of those followers, or so a lot of them are fake followers. Like there's some ways to vet that out. We have tools that help us like kind of vet that out to see if they truly have influence. Are their people engaged? Can they call their following to action, and do they take action? Because there's a lot of, if somebody is in their bio, if they're calling themselves an influencer, they're probably not an influencer of the target audience that you want. If it's hashtag, PR friendly, call me. They're looking for brands to pay. We recently discovered this underground, we call it the mom mafia, of all of these kind of mom accounts that had really high followings, and they were just kind of pimping out their accounts to different brands. And what we noticed was they just kind of had this ring of people that were of other kind of mom quote unquote influencers that are not truly influential, that were just retweeting each other's content. And so again, when you take a transactional approach and you don't make this authentic and pure and about really in a wow way and a true relationship way to do it, you're not going to get the same results. And so we go to the next slide.
Yeah, and before we go to the next slide, I do want to do a shout out. One of our attendees here, Veronica Henley, said she and her friend took a selfie at Times Square for that promotion. Now she understands how it happened, so she's grateful for the backstory. And what's going to come next is really a charity that both Amanda and I are big fans of, and she's done an amazing job with. And you're going to really love this, as you know, if you don't know No Kid Hungry, which if you're in the restaurant business, you should, because this is probably the biggest charity of choice for the restaurant industry. So walk us through what you did here, Amanda.
Yeah, sure. So No Kid Hungry, again, I'm going to keep re-emphasizing the strategy of any social strategy to be, how do we activate communities that exist, identify and activate communities, influencers, advocates. And so with No Kid Hungry, I started looking at communities. What are the communities that exist right now that are first already supporting it? So there's a lot of people in the restaurant industry, a lot of big brands. And if you think about some of the numbers and followings of some of these big brands are pretty significant. And the power of our networks all together is far more powerful than just any individual account. And so we started identifying the communities that exist. The other thing we said is influencers, let's kind of break this in two. We're going to do, or for influencers, we're going to do a social council of social media influencers that are really passionate about the cause, that are willing to invest in coming up with, and putting some hustle into this and helping us organize social media strategies and helping us execute various activations. And then the third was advocates, a digital advocate program for people that maybe don't have enough time, as much time, but they're willing to participate in some of these activations. We really like to focus on these single day activations where you, all three of those things, you focus them towards a single call to action. So examples of those are Giving Tuesday. Every year we do a Giving Tuesday campaign where we rally our advocates, communities, and influencers together, single call to action to get our networks to donate to No Kid Hungry, set a goal for that, update people in real time around that goal. And then the tweet out for No Kid Hungry, that single call to action is to drive people to this like dine out map that highlights participating dine out restaurants where they can dine out to go do good. And so again, this is like one time, and this is the power of this, one time that you have brands, that you have advocates, that you have influencers, that you have celebrities, all coming together towards a common goal, a collective community, common purpose and goal that they can achieve. And you're able for them to experience the power of a community come together, and I'll show you how that works. The next slide. So again, if we kind of network, we can skip past this part, but again, we evaluate the network and the influencers and who's participated before, so we kind of know how to reach out every year. So here you kind of see on the left side, the social council, the power of their communities put together, kind of influencers like celebrities that the part of this campaign is reaching out to celebrities as well. And then digital advocate kind of Facebook groups. We put together what we call activation toolkits for all these advocates and communities, where it shows them ways that they can set them up for success. So for example, in last year's Giving Tuesday activation, we decided to leverage Facebook personal fundraisers. And part of the work before this campaign was just recruiting as many people as possible to commit to doing personal fundraisers for No Kid Hungry on that day. And we want to equip them with best practices on how to have a successful fundraiser. Here's some pro tips. Here's how you can get people to donate. Here's some content that you have that you can share. We make it really easy for them to participate and give them that guide. Last year, just the Facebook fundraisers alone, and so that social there, raised over $60,000 in a single day, just those fundraiser parts of that. We can go to the next slide. And these single day activations, any of you in marketing that look at marketing stats, whether it's through ads or banner ads or, 201 word of mouth impressions is extraordinary. Being able to reach through an organic approach over 76 million people is extraordinary. And part of that is if you had to buy that every time, it would be insanely expensive to buy that much reach through banner ads or social ads or any other kind of ads, and you just get it for that one time when you bought it, right? The power of this strategy is if you look at, we started doing these one-day giving campaigns way back in like 2010. And I remember I promised my Twitter followers that if we raised $5,000, that was the modest goal we had back then. I do a video blog in a pink dress, and over time, this approach and this strategy that's organic, this community builds and grows. You have the same people that participated last year want to come back and have that experience again and do good. And then you're adding on new people and you're recruiting new. So if you just look at this chart on the right, it shows how this organic approach grows the movement. And so in 2013, that fundraiser raised $55,000 by that time. So a few years of just growing this community. By 2014, it was $127,000. By 2015, just a year later, you jump from $127,000 to $249,000. And if we fast forward to last year's Giving Tuesday, so we're starting to integrate this now. We have a bigger audience than ever that's participating organically in that single day, $310,000 in a day.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. And again, it's for a wonderful cause. And this really shows you when Amanda talked about, focusing on being a human here, right? You're not getting this kind of result without people connecting with this emotionally and knowing that they're making a difference. And so that's a great recap here.
Yeah, and this is just basically like some key points that I always like to make is there's going to be bad disruption, but you can also create good disruption. Disruption could be good. Trying new things can be good in this space. Co-creating your future with others. Too often brands are saying, they're talking about our story. We need to tell our story. Understanding that your story is composed of the people that work for you. Your brand is your employees. Your brand is your consumers. People are experiencing your brand, and they're telling the stories of their brand is really what's making up your brand. So making sure that you're co-creating this with those people, you have better results. Focusing your strategies on creating and activating these human mediums of influencers, advocates, communities. Focusing on connecting with them in really authentic ways, and provoking emotions and experiences for those people. And then, this is the be the change in me. Believe that the stories that marketers tell matter, because they do. We, just as much as news, just as much as politics, just as much as all other influencers, we shape how people perceive the world. We have the ability to do that, and in times like these where things are so divisive, we have the unique superpowers to be able to show a more kind and gentle world and make people a little bit more loving than we need to be. So I think we all should be focused on creating the kind of marketing that moves people, because in a time right now where the internet is full of people Facebook fighting and a lot of hate and divisiveness and resentment, love can go just as viral as hate, and we need more brands out there kind of focused on being, what we say, bringing the human and the humane back to the internet, and making love go viral as well.
That's fantastic, and that's a great recap of how it goes. So, as everyone saw, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really want to thank Amanda and all of you for hanging in there and listening to some great stories about how you can bring humanity into your marketing, bring more guests into your restaurant. As a reminder, you will get a copy of this, and we invite you to join us for future webinars. And thank you so much for doing this. This has been a fantastic day, and I hope everyone else just goes out and thinks about this with some thought-provoking things here. Thanks, Amanda, and I'll talk to you also very soon.
Thanks, Fred.